Okay, well, it's 2:05, so I think we can start. Welcome, everyone. The usual Zoom greetings. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Andrea Medrado, currently Vice President of IAMCR and a lecturer at the School of Media and Communication of the University of Westminster in London. And you are all very welcome to the book launch, Concealing for Freedom, The Making of Encryption, Secure Messaging and Digital Liberties, by Francesca Musiani and Ksenia Ermoshina, part of the IAMCR webinar series. These are events in partnerships with IAMCR sections and working groups to foster engagement in occasions that are outside of the annual IAMCR conferences. And this event is being sponsored by the Communication Policy and Technology CPT section of IAMCR. So I'm honored to be here representing the association during the launch of this important title, the first in-depth sociological inquiry in the field of secure communication. And I wanted to thank, of course, Francesca and Ksenia, the authors of the book. Francesca is also co-chair of the CPT section, and Ksenia, a former co-chair of the Emerging Scholars Network section. Thank you also to Bruce Girard and his team for all the work organizing this event, making this event happen. And we will have the usual webinar rules.
Recording in progress.
All the microphones are muted during the presentations, but participants are, of course, welcome to interact via the chat box. And there will be a Q&A moment after the presentation, when anyone can interact either by typing in the chat or unmuting themselves and speaking. Just so you know, we are recording this webinar, and it's going to be available on the IAMCR webinars webpage afterwards. And we are also live streaming it via isoc.live, and the link is in the chat, if I'm not mistaken. So I will now introduce Joe Pearson, who will act as our moderator and our discussant today. He's a professor of responsible digitalization at Free University Brussels and at School of Social Sciences, at Hasselt University in Belgium. He is also a former chair of the CPT section. So Joe, the screen is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for a nice introduction. So, and as announced, I was asked to act as moderator, but also as discussant for this very interesting webinar on the book launch of Concealing for Freedom, The Making of Encryption, Secure Messaging and Digital Liberties. So besides moderating the event, I will also at the end give some comments, some feedback, some questions, possibly also already on the book, and based on also the presentation that our two presenters will give. So that's the occasion to introduce two speakers to you, the two authors of the book. First of all, Ksenia Ermoshina, and the other author being Francesca Musiani. They are both tenured researchers at the French National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS. They are based at the Center for Internet and Society, which Francesca co-founded and co-directs. From 2016 to 2018, both of them worked on the H2020 project Next Leap, which stands for Next Generation Techno-Social and Legal Encryption, Access and Privacy. And as you will hear, possibly also in the presentation, but also mentioned in the book, this project has been very important for establishing the research that came out of this and resulted in the book being presented today. Their research of both of the authors explores the internet infrastructures and architectures as tools for governance and resistance in today's digital world. That's for now. I give the floor to Ksenia and Francesca to start the presentation.
So thank you very much. Thank you to IAMCR, to Andrea for spearheading this, to you for accepting the moderation and the discussion of this, and to all of you who took the time to be here today. And I also really wish to thank Jolie from Internet Society World, who kindly picked up on this webinar, and Isaac, both at the global level and in some of its national chapters, has a strong interest in encryption. So we are very grateful that this has been simulcast and live streamed by them. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. Well, I forgot to explicitly mention Bruce Girard, who supervises this and many other activities of IAMCR with the same attention and patience. So thanks a lot, Bruce, for this and for everything. So time to say a few things about this book. I am going to share a few slides to do so. So this is the cover of the book that has to do with the chameleons, but also with ASCII code and with messaging, more or less secure. So the book, as it has been mentioned, is called Concealing for Freedom, and the keywords around it are really, on one hand, encryption, on the other hand, secure messaging, and the third, digital liberties, with the idea of exploring the crossroads between these three phenomena, and we will be saying many more things about this in the coming minutes with Ksenia, who is also here and will be speaking in two instances in the presentation as I will. So the book has been published by Mattering Press, which I would like to give a bit of a heads up and publicity about. It is an open access researcher-led and owned publisher that is based in the UK. Incidentally, this has meant that we haven't yet received physical copies of the book that are stuck in some customs limbo between UK and France, because of Brexit has had no influence whatsoever on our lives. Right, but yeah, so we are expecting patiently, and the good thing in the meantime is that the book is open access, and so if you feel like buying a paper copy and accept the risk that at some point is going to show up in your mailbox when it goes through customs, please do, because it will help Mattering Press to also co-fund other open access projects. But it is already readily accessible and available on the internet and on the Mattering Press website. So as you started to mention, this book comes out of a specific context of a research project and research funding, which is meaningful in many respects. For how the shape that the book ended up taking, and how we have presented our research results. This research has been conducted in the frame of this European H2020 project, Next Generation Technosocial and Legal Encryption, Access and Privacy, or NextLEAP, which ran from 2016 to 2018. And so we had 3 years of funding. So this project is about also a very particular historical context that I will be also saying a little bit more about in the next slide. But so far, I will just say that something very important has happened for privacy consciousness, self-consciousness of users about privacy, and knowledge about a number of techniques that are available, or that could or should be available to users to protect their communications. And this phenomenon has been the revelations by Edward Snowden about the system of mass surveillance that was spearheaded by the National Security Agency, and all the different alliances and liaisons that it revealed between governmental agencies and private sector actors. In order to exert surveillance on specific populations or on the population at large. And so this project, and I'm sure quite a few others in that period of time that immediately followed the Snowden revelation, was funded with the idea of building that research, interdisciplinary research about privacy could serve to build things that could do something about what the Snowden revelations had brought to the fore, and could help good research that merged social sciences and hard sciences and computer science, first and foremost, could really help on a daily basis and very concrete one, citizens to improve their secure communications. And so within this, next leap came to our minds the idea for this project, and was subsequently funded with the idea of developing an interdisciplinary science of decentralization merged with privacy that could provide a basis on which to build or help building new protocols for secure communications. And here is a part of the team, including me. Ksenia is not there yet because she was hired a little bit afterwards on the project as a postdoc. And so really this project owes a lot to this particular historical context that came out with the Snowden revelations. So I would like to mention before we go into the core content of the book that we also had the pleasure and the honor of having a Professor Laura Denardis from American University, with whom I have published a couple of volumes already. We had the pleasure to have her to write a preface or foreword for our book, and she decided to call it "The Political Life of Encryption." And in this preface, she goes beyond what is a more specific focus for our book, which is the field of secure communication, to speak about the wide variety of contexts in which encryption is the most politically charged of all internet technologies, as she describes, and she emphasizes that encryption is really a site of contestation and the tension between sets of competing values, and as such has seen its life or its multiplicity of lives crossed by multiple controversies that have technical components, but also economic and social and juridical. So this book is, it is Ksenia's turn. Apologies,
but I can, you know that we share
absolutely
all these points. So
I didn't remember if it was this one or the following one. Go for it.
So yes, Francesca just said encryption is a political thing, not just technical, and it's on the crossroads of many other subdisciplines, and not only cryptography, but also usability, which has become important for us as STS scholars. Why? I will try to explain, because this book actually in itself is a hybrid object, as it results from a collaboration with a team of computer scientists. So we were surrounded in Next Leap by cryptographers who do fundamental research in crypto, who are teaching in best schools of the world, and who are innovating fundamentally. For example, one of our colleagues, George Donezis, is now working on post-quantum cryptography. So he is kind of in the avant-garde of the making of encryption protocols. And we as social scientists, as STS researchers, wanted to collaborate with them, but this collaboration had an interesting life itself, because in the beginning, when we joined the project, and I think this is important to understand also how this book is written and how this writing was experienced by us when we were trying to put this into words. They were expecting from us quite a quantitative sociological-ish work, which actually is done today by usability studies or usable security, which is a sub-discipline that is studying how encryption systems are used by people. And this discipline proposes quite a quantitative approach. Users are put into a table. They have to respond to kind of close questionnaires, yes or no. And the goal is to have an analysis, almost a statistical analysis of what are people afraid of, what do they protect, how do they do it, and so on and so forth. So half of our team was expecting this kind of work from us, but we decided that we will use these expectations also to understand how cryptographers imagine users, how they envision and embody users through these tables, through this kind of quantitative descriptions. And we tried to not just do what they want, but also do our job and analyze their reflection and our collaboration with them. Another objective of this book is to analyze the arena, which is the encryption and secure messaging. It's a galaxy of projects that are rapidly evolving, and even now there are still new messengers that appear every now and then. People have many apps. They are kind of diving in this mess of messengers, the notion that we use in the book. And this phrase was coined by Holger Krekel, one of our colleagues from NextLeap team, to describe the vibing and the diverse scene of messaging apps that propose encryption and privacy by design, followed Edward Snowden revelations, and also followed the very deep discussions in the cryptographic community about how do we go from now when the public is interested in encryption, when it's not just a matter of fundamental scientists, but it's a public matter, a political matter. How do we deal with this? So the core idea of this book, it is a social science research, but it is deeply embedded amongst technologists, and it also, we hope, can help to improve technologies. One of the outcomes of our work, for example, is very practical, because we collaborated with Delta Chat, which is one of the secure messaging apps that we studied, and an STS-informed usability research was conducted to help Delta Chat improve their design. So this is very interesting, because my personal journey as one of the two authors of this book was from being an STS postdoc, very, very curious about things, to become a user experience researcher in one of these messaging app projects. If we can, sorry. Yeah, so as I said, this is a very rapidly changing field, and no systematization was done back in 2016 of what was happening. So we wanted to provide an analytical portrait of this field, but also use STS conceptual apparatus to describe this phenomena. And this book, we hope, will be of interest for technologists and STS scholars as well. But we also hope to maybe fuel some discussions on practices with and around privacy protecting communication tools. When we started this research, the fieldwork was actually quite challenging, because no systematization existed in human science, at least. So we did a mapping of all the projects that we could find that would offer end-to-end encryption. That means that the messages are encrypted not just on the server, but on users' phones or computers before they are sent. and the user receives an encrypted message and decrypts it on his or her device. So this this field is still in the making. Some of the logos on the right you may recognize, for example, Signal or Telegram, which is a very problematic case, and we dedicated even a special paper after the book was written. We decided to dive a bit deeper in the Telegram case and its success in Russia, its controversial success. So in this book, we try to talk about various messaging apps, and not just about the apps, but through the entrance via a particular case study, we try to talk about the architectures that they are based on, the protocols, and some of the drama, because crypto scene is full of drama. And the book is actually, when I was talking to you about this gap, no, because technologists from Next Leap team have their own idea of what users need, and then there are users who have their own idea of what they need and what encryption can and cannot do. So we wanted to study these interactions of developers and other stakeholders. For example, how developers and users interact, whether some of these messaging apps are informed by user needs, or are they based on some abstract theoretical research about encryption. We also talked to security trainers, including those who work in very risky areas. For example, we interviewed some of the trainers who are working in Ukraine, and some of the journalists who went to the war, because the war in Ukraine is here for 8 years. And we have been examining how encryption helps or sometimes not helps to save people's lives of those who go to these risky areas, and how they actually conceptualize risk and how they use these tools. But also we wanted to look at the interactions with standardizing bodies and weird configurations of standardizing or not standardizing or partly standardizing of protocols, and also, of course, the funding organizations and different business models that are behind these projects. We had a core common objective of creating tools that conceal for freedom, because Next Leap was not just us, it was also technologists who were building protocols, and some of the protocols are now in use. For example, AutoCrypt is one of the results of Next Leap, and there are many more. While differing in their intended technical architectures, these messaging apps that we studied, they targeted user publics, and their underlying values and business models also vary. So we try to describe all these various classifications and provide a summary of what's happening in the field.
Sorry, I had muted myself. So what we try to do overall in this book is really looking at what we call the experience of encryption. So the idea is really to look at observing that there is such a great variety of secure messaging protocols and tools today, and try to do some kind of not comparison in a strict sense, but inductive categorization of like what they do in terms of architectural choices, business models, and so on, with the idea to see what these endeavors mean for the making of digital liberties in the daily activity of developers and in the daily preference and choices expression of users. So just to say a little bit about what we draw from. So there is this idea of the bringing a social science perspective on encryption that we really did not start, albeit we focused on a specific terrain that was really underexplored so far. But we do draw a lot on a number of scholars, including some of them really active in IAMCR, by the way. So from the work of Gabriela Coleman on crypto freedom, but also Stefania Milan's recent work on the practices of data activism, Arne Hintz and Lina Dencik and others work on data justice. and also the body of work that observes how encryption is a matter of competing imaginaries that help construct specific understandings of freedom. Sarah Myers-West and Isadora Hellegren have been writing papers about this, for example, and also I want to cite Linda Monse's recent book about cryptopolitics that retraces a number of controversies that generate specific ideas of security, citizenship, and privacy. So we try to merge this first social sciences angle on a very technical and complex subject with another, trying to keep on unveiling what decentralized technical architectures are about from a social sciences perspective. So in some, so we built on some of my previous work on what I call the dwarfs without giants alternatives to internet services. So examining the concurrent push toward different types of design choices as a source of social, technical, political, economic, and legal tensions. We also draw back to, well, of course, Laura Denardis' work as on internet governance as a set of control points. We have crossed recent work on movements in decentralization of the internet and internet services. So from work done on the blockchain to the ways in which privacy is preserved through architectural-based means. And we go back to also what Phil Eger said in the early 2000s, that architecture is politics, but it should not be understood as a substitute for politics. So in this book, we really, in several instances, look at all the ways in which the picture of a linear translation between a technical architecture and something else that has a political value is complicated and made more difficult by well, the action of different actors and the different choices that have to do with both economy and technology and so on. This is back to you, Ksenia.
I guess, yeah, but it's very much connected with the architecture question, because we decided to divide our chapters, some of the chapters of the book, according to the architecture of the messaging app or apps that were the kind of use cases for the chapter. So we analyzed after the 30 messaging apps that we first mapped, we found out that the three main architecture types that were there were centralized or peer-to-peer or federated. So we decided to write about every architecture and what it does and what it does not offer to users, and also why the advocates of centralization, for example, think that it's much better than going federated or decentralized. So we tried to also map controversies around these architectures. The first chapter of this big, like the first use case of these big 3 chapters is Signal. This is one of the most famous messaging apps that offer state-of-the-art kind of security. And what's interesting about Signal is that it is centralized, and its owner, Moxie Marlinspike, is defending centralization. He has written a blog post that has become a kind of an iconic text for many developers that quote it, the ecosystem is moving. And in this post, he defended centralization as offering much more security for developers, because they can control all the implementations of their product. While if Messenger is decentralized, then there might be some leaks or some misimplementations, failures, and so on. So he insisted on the advantages of centralization, and we tried also to understand his motivations, even though we managed to interview Moxie, and he actually openly asked us to not quote him explicitly in any text. So it was quite tricky to write about Signal. So we chose an apathetic way of writing about Signal by asking other people from other projects who had to do something with Signal protocol to tell us about how they use Signal protocol, because Signal protocol has become kind of the basis even for Facebook's messaging app, for WhatsApp that also uses the same encryption protocol, Wire, and even Matrix, which is a decentralized app, but using Signal protocol. The Signal case is also interesting in regards to standardization, because they decided to openly not standardize their protocol and even use some kind of what is called obfuscated open source, which means that the protocol was out there, but it was not documented, so it was very difficult for other projects to implement it. And Signal offered implementation as a service kind of business model by providing technical consultancy and help to projects that wanted to implement Signal protocol. The second case that we tried to use to understand variety of protocols and offered by secure messaging apps was Leap and Pixelated, which is kind of the same project. And in this chapter about federation, what we tried to understand is what is new that's offered by federation that is not there in peer-to-peer or centralization. And we found that basically federation offers 4 C's, which I think is a nice thing that Francesca came up with. It's her kind of creative touch. So the 4 C's of federation is care, community, customization, and compatibility. So federated messaging apps rely on a variety of community actors. And I will give you just one example. The most famous is email. Actually, email is a federated communication system. And email is pretty much dependent on email service providers who maintain servers and who care for the service. But it's also compatible. So compatibility comes from this. I can send you an email from my @cnrs.fr to your Gmail. I don't have to force you to also be at @cnrs.fr. So this is what federation can propose. And in the end, we also looked at peer-to-peer messaging. It's something that is around for many years, and peer-to-peer is full of promises. Also politically wise, because we spoke about architectures as politics, but not replacing politics. Peer-to-peer is kind of an anarchist dream of directly communicating between each other without intermediaries, without creating this power kind of stakeholders that will keep all your data on their servers and so on. Direct communication between equals. This is the promise. But in fact, now, even in 2022, the fieldwork was finished around 2018-19, but even now in 2022, there is no secure messaging app that would be peer-to-peer and easy to use and offer for users an easy management of group chats, easy and kind of simple interface and so on. So in these chapters, we have described these 3 types of architecture, putting them in a broader ecosystem of projects. And we are coming to our conclusions, because we want to also have a discussion. And first, some of conclusions on decentralization, which are, I think, important to advance the discussion about decentralization. We wanted to show that the choice of centralized technical architecture is a very complex compromise that is context-based. And it's not just the result of choices between abstract models, like cryptographers are not there choosing abstractly to make a decentralized or centralized app. It is very much a context-driven, economic-driven, and politically driven. So, and peer-to-peer also, as I just said, is not ideal solution for all problems. And another conclusion, I think it's still me, no? Yeah. Another conclusion that I think is important, like set of conclusions, it concerns encryption. So we wanted, of course, to nuance the framing of encryption as a mechanism that allows criminals to conceal the content of their communication from the judicial system, which is quite a popular statement of many governments, like the Five Eyes, for example, argument against encryption as something that helps terrorists. We wanted to show that encryption needs to be legal, as digital technologies not only increase the possibilities of surveillance, but they do so in a fundamentally asymmetric manner that is incompatible with democracy. And this asymmetry, we see it, for example, now in the case of war in Ukraine, and Russian surveillance say that has grown so big that the resistance inside the country is completely like transparent. If it was not for encryption messaging apps, for example, Signal or Telegram, that help people to coordinate a democratic movement within an authoritarian country. And of course, encryption helps to partially restore the social norms around communication that were expected before the digital communications appeared. For example, the right to privacy, the right to have secrets. And the encryption and the ability to compromise it is an intensely political issue, if not an outright proxy for power, as we also showed with our recent research on Russia.
Yeah, so we also say a few words in conclusions about standardization, because it has a large part, for example, in the way in which Signal has become such a prominent actor in the secure messaging field with its informal standardization processes. So we have precisely noticed this, that developers in the secure messaging field actually are increasingly emphasizing that standardizing bodies are very much institutionalized. It's a little bit what Sandra was mentioning in the chat about the ATF and not making a lot of consensus when it comes to quantum computing. So it's a little bit the same thing happening in this field. A lot of developers do feel that there is this progressive distancing of standardization bodies, even those that are pretty informal and well, and made up of members of the technical civil society technical community as well, such as the ITF, from the coding communities. So this often creates an environment that is felt as less suitable for experimental and unfinished projects by the developers. And so we have seen in the book how in several ways formal standardization is felt as being neither necessary nor desirable. So we also say a few words in the conclusions about the General Data Protection Regulation. We do not make a treatise about it because it's there is really a lot to say about it, and several other people are doing it very well. But one thing that we did wish to emphasize was that there has been one core hypothesis that has subtended the creation of GDPR that might affect its effectiveness when it comes to these tools for secure communications that we analyzed. And more specifically, there is this implicit premise about GDPR that it is fundamentally based on the paradigm of centralized architecture. You can see it, for example, when the data controller, the figure of the data controller is outlined, that they are implicitly assumed to be these large centralized servers under the control of external entities that are in the cloud, in charge of a cloud. So what we suggest in the book was that there might be, if there is the time and the opportunity to refine and update this in the future, perhaps it will better account for what is happening in fields like this one of secure messaging. So to sum up, we describe encryption today in this field of secure messaging also through the lens of what STS scholars of internet governance have called the mundane practices, so emphasizing the daily dimensions of internet governance, both on the side of developers' choices and activities, and users' choices and activities, but still deeply entwined with the institutional arenas, both standardization international bodies or supranational or national authorities that try to regulate issues related to digital liberties and communication, such as privacy or freedom of expression. And the STS can help help analyze the ways in which all of the above is entwined and continuously crosses paths, both in terms of actors and processes. So this is it on our end for now, although we do look forward to answering questions, and we give the video floor back to Jo for some comments. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we all see one another better.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for a nice presentation, Ksenia and Francesca. So I was asked to reflect a bit on the book, having read the book and going into some topics, and possibly in that way lead up to a discussion and questions, because I saw already a question by Sandra in the chat, and let's move to that later on then. So as quite nicely being said, you couldn't have a more timely book at this moment than this one, I think, in our field. It's so much on topic given the current global situation, of course, and also regarding the core message which we have in this book and which presented now, that this is how these encrypted messaging tools are really at the center of what the authors call a powerful double narrative. And so on the one hand, a strong, very positive discourse around empowerment, user empowerment, citizen empowerment, and in that way, better protection of fundamental civil liberties and how they enable this to do. But on the other hand, also a very strong critical discourse, especially by intelligence agencies, but also political parties sometimes and other factions of society, the allegations concerning this technology regarding fostering crime, fostering terrorism, and you shouldn't allow this, and so on and so on. So, and how to balance this is exactly what this book nicely does, and also bringing in these perspectives from the fields that dealing with these issues, as there are science and technology studies and media and communication studies. So on two levels, I would say this book, the societal relevance, as I mentioned already. I can even give an interesting anecdote about Belgium at the moment. You might know or not know, there is a proposal for law in Belgium on forcing all communication players to store metadata, all the metadata they have. This is a retry of a former regulation where data retention was, and in the end, abolished by the European Court. And now the Belgian government thinks to have found a solution, not to store the data themselves, but to enforce the storage of metadata, which in fact would prohibit secure messaging like Signal, like other systems like Tor, if this law would pass. Now, there's a huge discussion taking place at the moment in Belgium about, we have a government on the one hand, more right-wing parties, on the other hand, the Greens. And so there's a very interesting discussion happening on this double narrative at this moment. Should we indeed allow this kind of thing, that the government has access to this kind of metadata, or is it not in the interest of civil liberties to do this or not? But of course, even more societal relevant, and we mentioned rightfully, and also added on the website, Ksenia and Francesca added a comment on an update on the book about the situation and what's happening with invasion in Ukraine and war happening there, and how this, of course, plays out in this field of secure messaging, and how these tools enable protecting people that are fighting for their rights, but at the same time also being used for spreading disinformation, for misinforming people, for hate speech, and so on and so on. So it's a very, very double-edged topic, and very nicely in that way framed within the book, I would say, especially given the situation in Korea. It's even more now, not so much a matter of freedom, as they eloquently put it, but also a matter now of saving human lives in the end. And that makes it, of course, so much relevant in this case. Also, regarding societal relevance, I think it fits in the current debates, also a lot in the technology scene on the move to decentralization, or how they call it, the authors, re-decentralization. On the one hand, for example, things like edge computing, where the intelligence is moved towards the edges of the scene and not so much in one big cloud system. But also regarding developments taking place in Belgium, Flanders a lot, and projects I'm involved in, regarding data vaults, the whole technology idea about Solid, and Tim Berners-Lee being involved there with his own company, Interrupt, of developing data pods where individuals themselves hold the data and only give access to certain kind of parties, often oriented at private parties like Facebook and other social media. So also there you see decentralization, re-decentralization being very much taking place at this moment. And finally, on the societal relevance, I would say the move towards interoperability. You have now recently the Digital Services Act in the making. There's still a lot to be defined there, but the first proposals go in the direction that messaging systems would be forced to be interoperable, so that you cannot have silos of messaging, and they should operate in a similar way as also being mentioned in the presentation as email is happening, that it's not important which email provider you have, you just can send messages to each other. And besides the technological initiative being taken as being very much described in the book, is also on the legal regulatory front is a lot of happening regarding interoperability, and it can only be applauded, of course, because it avoids a kind of avoids silos within these kind of system and path dependency in a way. Besides the societal relevance, why I very much enjoyed reading the book is, of course, the kind of way it helps thinking within a couple of disciplines, very much oriented at these issues. And foremost, of course, science and technology studies, but also media and communication studies on the crossroads with computer science. If you look at, for example, the way within media and communication studies is looked upon these kinds of issues, especially when you talk of media technologies or digital technologies, it's very interesting to see, and also being reflected in the book, is this always this three-way perspective, as Leifro and Livingstone have described it once, the mutual shaping between, on the one hand, you look into the artifacts, the technological artifacts, what are they able to do and what is happening, but also what is not possible, and so what kind of things are out of, and the affordances these kind of artifacts based on that have. But also this needs to be complemented, and it's also nicely done by the interviews being done in the book, with the practices of people, different users, but also other stakeholders like civil society, digital rights organizations, and so on. And so how they, in the end, give their own meaning on this, and how this is not so much only a technical story, but also socio-cultural, user-oriented story. And this is really nicely put in the book, that it's not so a black and white situation, even when discussing the scoreboard by Electronic Frontier Foundation, also there indicating how these kind of things cannot easily be cut up in a very black and white situation, and you need to look at this from a kind of social science user perspective. And third level, besides artifact and practices, Leifro and Livingstone talk about the socioeconomic arrangements. And this, of course, relates to the whole issue about standardization, regulation, but also the business models behind these kinds of tools and how they are established. So, like, where is the money coming from, and how might this influence the way these things are being operated, or having have kind of sustainability in the end. So in that regard, I think when you look at the way this, and as mentioned also in the presentation, the importance also of these mundane practices, being mentioned as one of the three levels I just mentioned, and how this has related also some intriguing concepts and discussions, for example, like digital migration problem, where how to, if systems are not interoperable, how do people engage with this migration problem, how they move to another one. And this even leads to, for example, security trainers emphasizing some kind of technologies which some people in the West describe as no-goes, like WhatsApp, Facebook, Meta kind of things. But when you look at it from a bottom line, how to protect yourself and not have too much hurdles or bottlenecks in order to protect yourself, well, it might be just as easy to go into systems like WhatsApp, because they are in the end-to-end encrypted. Of course, you have the big GAFAM players looking into this kind of things, especially on the metadata level. But if it's a matter of life and death, or a matter of being free or not, then these kinds of things are almost a luxury problem. And that is some interesting reflection I also made out of this book. So how to balance these kind of things, and how to think about these things, and also not so easily to cut up these things like high risk and low risks, and so, which they also kind of nicely criticize in that regard. What I also very much liked about it is the own experience I have of doing many technology-oriented projects with engineers, European project, but also elsewhere. and as they frame it, being the useful sociologist in a team of technologists. So this is the kind of thing you are confronted with. And I've been used to it now, although it still keeps on being pushed into this kind of direction as a researcher, social science researcher, that in a direction which technology people understand, meaning if it's about users, it's user interfaces, it's human-computer interaction, it's usability. That's something they understand, and it's easy to frame towards them. Or in the other way, to go to consumer research and deliver some big survey, which then indicates how much usability of the user friendliness certain kind of tool has. And they try to get over this within this book, but you see also within their writing the struggle to deal with this. In order to publish, for example, they need to go to the level of usability to some extent in order to make the link, to be in a useful, meaningful way, to do meaningful interdisciplinary work in a way that they understand the other side, meaning technology side, understand things you are doing. But in the end, of course, also going over this when they describe more the theoretical links to this. And the final remark on the book is I see a lot of links also to some very interesting work happening lately by Seda Guerces on computational infrastructures, where she talks about how you see it's often not so much an issue about privacy even or data protection, but about market dominance. And then you go more into political economy, that giving the example of the corona tracing apps, where in the end it was Google and Apple that decided what kind of protocol, what kind of way these tools should be built. Luckily, they chose the decentralized way, but for the same reason, they could have chosen the centralized way. And so there was no debate at all, no democratic discussion. What should be the outcome? In the end, even it were these two parties that forced France, I think also, but also UK, to use a decentralized tool and not a centralized tool. And so that's nice, because in the end we had a decentralized, much more privacy-friendly tool. But it's less nice because it shows the dominance of these players in deciding on core matters like these. In the end, these are not health companies. These are, to one extent, advertising company, another extent, a technology company deciding on health apps like corona tracing apps, which is kind of strange if there's no democratic debate around this in the end. So there's some remarks on that level. Also, finally, I just visited the CPDP conference, which is it's a very interesting conference on privacy and data protection, and a lot of debate happening there also last week in Brussels on the issue of decentralization and the possible solutions, technological solutions, but also regulatory solutions being proposed at the moment. One of them, which I didn't know about, for example, was an alternative for Tor called NIM, NYM, where a lot of very prominent cryptography scholars are involved in to kind of build another system, probably more sustainable, because also based on some subscription fees and so on. So let's see. But you see, again, reflecting back on how relevant and how timely it is, a lot of these elements are happening at this moment. So I've took up enough sufficient time of other comments, which I possibly can introduce later on. But I first want to give the floor now to the people here present. And perhaps, first of all, I'm not going to read questions, the last question, but I saw earlier a question by Sandra Bremen related to another technology she's involved in called quantum computing, I think it was, Sandra. Could you perhaps say the question you have there or reflection you have?
Thank you, Yo, for those excellent comments, and thank you to the speakers for this really interesting book. The question I actually have was, of course, the punchline. Readers want to know, what's your recommendation? What should I be using? You danced around that. You had critiques of two versions. You didn't offer a critique of the federated version, so there was something implicit. But if you're willing to make a positive statement, it would be very interesting. The comment earlier was about quantum, just adding to it that it wasn't a question, it was just a comment, because I'm a fellow at the Quantum Network Center at Center for Quantum Networks. The University of Arizona is the one with the U.S. National Science Foundation money in this regard. I know there's a lot of activity in Europe as well around this, just saying that I've been astonished. This is my second year with them. I'm astonished at the extent to which they aren't paying any attention to the IETF or even to the question a protocol's the first meeting to even begin to discuss reaching any agreement on what might be standards is this fall. In their case, it's for very good reason, because they actually, there are multiple different ways of building a quantum network that differ in such extreme, along many very extreme dimensions, that it's actually too early to reach any consensus, but one would think they'd be paying attention to what's actually going on at the IETF and in other standard setting bodies. There are 2 RFCs already at the IETF dealing with quantum networks. There's an active research group dealing with quantum networks, and there are other RFCs being discussed that deal with quantum networks at the IETF. So the internet's looking at quantum, quantum isn't yet looking at the internet.
Thanks a lot for comments, Sandra, and for the question. I will start, and Francesca will maybe also add something regarding the advice. Do we have something to recommend? I think that the answer is in the chapter that talks about threat modeling and risks, because we were analyzing how trainers recommend certain tools and what are the basis of these recommendations. And we found out that there was a transition from kind of tool-oriented trainings that would put one tool in the center and speak about it. For example, Signal, that's great. Everyone install Signal. I will help you to install Signal now, or Tor, and so on. Now the trainings are more about understanding what are the situations of communication, the communication acts that you are yourself in. What are your social graphs? Can you please, for example, describe, group the context that you have and describe these groups that you have? For example, colleagues from the university, colleagues from this other research project that is in the risky area, my friends with whom I go to protest every Sunday, and so on. And based on those outputs from the users, trainers would recommend certain apps for certain communication acts. So it will be very context-based. That's why we do not come up with a recommendation per se, but it's true that we have a slight kind of subjective preference towards federation. And I think that this is a little bit my fault, because I was and still am involved in a federated messaging app that is called Delta Chat. And I decided to help them because a federation seemed to offer some answers to the most urgent questions that Joe was also underlining, like the one of interoperability, for example, data portability and migration. So this cannot be offered with centralized solutions. This is hardly offered by peer-to-peer solutions. So the one that is left is federation. And we see it from the rise of Fediverse, for example, Mastodon, which has a big success now in response to some of the Twitter scandals, to the fact that centralized social networks like Twitter have promised us a dialogue, like a global village where everyone will discuss with everyone. But in the end, they had to use algorithms because the data was so important, the volume was so big, that they had to kind of canalize this data in certain bubbles. And Fediverse offers a different model also for moderation, for security, and so on. So there is a slight preference towards federation as an architecture, but within this galaxy, there are many, many, many projects. So we don't recommend any specific project per se. This is also not maybe in the ethics of research to recommend anything. What we recommend is maybe to analyze your own threats and your own risks, and also understand risk as a dynamic, ever-changing process. Risk is a process, is not something that is done and given forever. And understand the risk as relational, because you are always connected to people who are weaker, in the sense that they are experiencing more threats than you. And this is a lesson that I personally learned from a person who we were interviewing for this book, who was himself in a very safe space of Austria, you know, like just making festival things. And he said, well, I have to move to secure messaging apps because I invite people from Iran or from Ukraine or to speak at my festival. So this will be maybe my advice, is to tailor recommendations according to what you experience. And also what I learned from trainers, observing them, and especially trainers who are not, from the global north, but those who work in, as I said, Iran is one of the cases that we had. I learned this humble attitude and understanding attitude to users. Of course, recommending PGP is nice, it's cool, no? But it's also hard for people, and making a step towards the user, giving her a hand and saying, okay, this is hard for you. I understand you don't have time to figure out. So let's use this other app that is easier, but also protects you. So that will be my answer to that.
Can I ask 2 quick follow-ups?
Sure.
So that was a terrific and valuable answer, Ksenia. Thank you. The 2 follow-up questions would be, one, what about supporting others? So at one point read that Lantern was really important in Ukraine. So I subscribed to Lantern actually as a way of supporting those in Ukraine. Did that make any sense? I'm not actually using it. I just was trying to support them. And the second question is how to deal with the boundaries of what it is we actually know about those in our network. I remember actually when I was section chair in IAMCR and was receiving lots of requests to get networked with people in LinkedIn from people who I assumed were in the association, but whom I actually knew nothing about, didn't remember if I'd ever met them, maybe my failure, but wasn't sure I'd ever even met them. And it made me very conscious of that question. What do you actually know about people? And so how do you deal with the limits for the second piece of your very important answer? Thanks.
Maybe I will answer to the first follow-up, and Francesca, you want to react maybe on the social graph kind of thing, if you want. For supporting projects, I think that what you did is really great, because what our book shows is also fragile economic status of many of those projects. They are often made by volunteers, and most of them are free, except for Freema, which is not free. And they are not using your data also, unlike WhatsApp is doing. So they are based either on grants that they have from different governmental and private actors, or on user support and donations. So I think that what you did is really a great gesture of support to developers who offer a free service for people who are really risking a lot. Thank you for being really responsible, and thank you for this gesture. It's really important, and it's revealing this economic fragility and absence of an answer, like how can we make these projects last without transforming them into traditional businesses or startups.
You can go for the second part as well, Ksenia, because I was thinking to maybe add something afterwards with regards to the measures, and so to link this question of the relational risk with one chapter that we did not talk a lot about. So go for it, as it was like a follow-up to your to your question, and then I'll do that.
This is really a hard question. I never thought of that. Of course, we don't know all about our communication partners, but I think that I would use a general kind of presumption that people may have something to hide, and this is better or not better, but this is more respectful towards your communication partners than to think that they have nothing to hide. I compared this to COVID at some point when I was talking recently at another conference. Like you have been tested negative, so you think that you can, and you are vaccinated and so on, so you don't wear a mask. You don't know what's happening with people around you, and like in the time where it was super important for everyone to respect these measures, we had the presumption that you may be in contact with a person who is at risk. And even if you have a light kind of version of COVID, this is really, I think this example is good, because even if you have nothing to hide, let's pretend that everyone around you is in danger. Or also, I wanted to refer to Russia, which is my homeland, and this is a pity because I'm looking at what's happening now. 10 years ago, things that are now illegal were legal. But I had an intuition back then that they might one day become illegal. So I'd rather protect myself as if they're already illegal now. Living in countries like Russia, you have to behave as if the state was your enemy every day, like all the time. So this is kind of the maximum security that you can offer. And I think that, well, that's what I learned from the person that I interviewed. Thinking of the most vulnerable parts of your network, caring for them is the new kind of ethical guideline in communication, I would say.
Yeah, I guess just to follow up really quickly on this, if I had concisely sought to answer the second part of your question, it would have been with the, I think what is the last sentence of the chapter we wrote on the relational risk and the threat modeling part, which is that we should behave as if we were always trying to protect the person that in our social graph, in our network of context, is in most need of concealing. Like even if it does seem to us that there is a situation in which we can live out in the open and so on, we should always consider this. The fact that we are always situated in this broader network, even if we are not necessarily directly interacting at the moment with the person who is the most risk, and sometimes make some choices that think also about that person. And otherwise, yeah, what I would like to add in terms of how to recommend, this is actually something that actors such as the Electronic Frontier Foundation and other NGOs concerned with digital liberties have attempted an answer to. And one of our chapters actually retraces quite in detail the attempt of the EFF to promote a guide through this maze of encrypted communication tools. And we found it really an interesting case because they did a first version of this guide that was really very much about tables and apps on one end and criteria on the other. And well, can this be lighted? Can there be a green light here? Or do we have to put a cross as if they do not fulfill this criterion or not? And progressively, and we were fortunate enough to speak with them about what have drawn the subsequent choices, they moved towards increasingly qualitative guides in that respect, to the point in which, like, this whole process that lasted several years for them ended with a blog post on the EFF website that was about like them not being able to actually make a guide that would provide a visual schematic appreciation of the different tools, because it was really depending on one's personal journey and what the profile they sought to present to the world was and what their backstage story was, and so on. So we finished that particular chapter by resuming this as sometimes narratives are the best categories, in the sense that they really seem to arrive to the conclusion that a very qualitative and tailor-made approach, such as the one that Ksenia was speaking about with the trainers, increasingly so, seems to be the most appropriate one.
Thank you for your answers, Ksenia and Francesca. Are there other questions? Otherwise, I have also questions too. If not, so again, the core message of the core idea also is there, as I mentioned in my comments, Ksenia and Francesca, is that it's a very difficult discussion society-wise of how to deal in a good way with secure messaging. Another anecdote from Belgium, Netherlands, is that in the middle of 2020, there was a huge operation by the police on breaking up a secure messaging app called EncroChat, which was enabled, was delivered on special phones by a Canadian company called Sky ECC. And they were cheering and celebrating this opening up, the reaching of the security, because it indeed enabled a lot of finding criminals, even a torture room somewhere where drug lords tortured other people. So it was a really big win, they said, for the police forces and even now still people are being arrested based on breaking up that encryption. And this is used also by the government, of course, by saying, look, it's important that we are able to enter these kind of secret because they are used by criminals. Now, that's the kind of typical narrative you get there. And especially with these kinds of things happening, this only substantiates their opinion on that and in order also the public debate. So how do you feel about, when these kind of things are happening, how would you say to deal with this, or what is the position you would take in these kinds of discussions?
Do you want to start, Ksenia, or shall I?
Please start.
Okay. Well, I'll start with, let's say, a general principle, and then perhaps Ksenia can chime in also for her experience as an activist and from what's currently happening in Ukraine. So at some point there was this report by a number of researchers at the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory that was called the Keys Under Doormats. Actually this was quite a landmark report, because they were basically, very, very basically, I am translating and depurating a lot, but they were saying, so once a door is open, or at least a key is slide under a doormat for a particular individual to open the door, it is available to everyone. And so basically this is really the conundrum of this double narrative thing, right? In the sense that there is this idea that really, if encryption is broken, or if there is the possibility to break it, it will never be selective. And so once again, it will be very much context dependent, the extent to which risks and benefits of doing so outweigh one another, I would say. So it's there is no like one single answer to that question, I would argue, and this is why actually this is such a big political controversy, and each state has a debate going on with this, and Europe has its own, is that there will always be, and rightly so, examples coming from both sides of the debate that one would feel morally right to uphold, right? So it's really a complicated issue, but technically speaking, like generally you would have the developers' core argument to be the keys under doormat one. If the keys under the doormat for a particular actor, including the state with the best intentions, it can generate significant collateral damage in other contexts or in that very context, and so it should be carefully weighed against what are the benefits of this.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Just looking at the audience, is there other questions that you have, or reflections, or you want to make in this regard?
I see a note by Maria in the chat saying that there are around the online safety bill in the UK. There are a number of big debates happening on these issues, and some of the most interesting developments have been happening post-Brexit. Yeah, I think that we mention among the significant national context that we mentioned in the conclusive chapter, there is the UK one as well. And thanks, Maria, for coming and for attending. In.
Yeah, if I may follow on that comment by Maria, indeed, and how the differences in opinions also matter. If you look at sociocultural differences in opinion on, for example, even between the US and the European Union with US, a lot on freedom of speech, while European Union on the fundamental right of privacy and how they might conflict, and what is happening there, and also related to the messaging app Telegram, which also being dealt with. And I saw also on the website, I'm going to read that also, the paper you wrote on this. I have a PhD researcher who's looking into this and looking into mainly how Telegram has become a safe haven for a lot of alt-right and extreme right parties and groups after they're being deplatformized on other platforms and rejoined on that platform and doing quite some not okay things on that platform. And also the lack of responsibility on the side of Telegram as a platform, meaning that even if you would try to set up some community rules or some norms in your group, or what is it called, channel you can have, a group chat you can have on Telegram, if you would want to do it, there's even not the affordance of doing so. So there's no way to communicate to a group which you are forming on Telegram to indicate, look, guys and girls, on this platform, we're not going to do hate speech, we're not going to attack people, something like that. You are not able, even if you would want to do it, you're not able to do it, except when establishing a bot or something, which is also a very high technical issue, which is not easy for all group chat moderators. But so also indicating that these platforms have this shared responsibility of tackling some of these issues, but also sometimes abstaining of doing this, while others, like, for example, Meta or Facebook, are being forced more or less, but still are at least doing some kind of moderation, or also on YouTube and stuff. So how would you say, you talk about Telegram, but because also the business model of Telegram is quite strange. It's a billionaire stepping out of within, and he's funding this, I think. It's not on donations, but it's somebody with a lot of money, I think, is paying this tools. So how would you see Telegram in this space? What is your opinion about that?
Maybe I start? Yeah. So just a follow-up about moderation in Telegram. First, there are possibilities to enable moderation, but they are they're becoming now more sophisticated. For example, the new version of Telegram supports chats from which you cannot share anything. It means that they are really closed, and you send a voice message, and this voice message can only be listened and or read if it's a text message in this chat. So this is something interesting, and this is used, for example, now by Russian anti-war activists who are coordinating and are afraid that their anti-war statements might be shared from outside these private groups. So this was one step that Telegram took in kind of assuring privacy and security of the users. And I'm personally sympathetic with this gesture of kind of disabling sharing by design. Bots are becoming very easy now. There are kind of bot constructors that kits that you can use. And myself, for example, I did a bunch of Telegram bots. I'm not a developer, so the barrier has become lower for that. Moderation bots exist. They are already like a number of them that can, for example, kick out people deciding, for example, if a user posts something and people downvote the message more than 10 times, for example, the person is automatically banned out of the group, and then you can customize for how many days or hours or forever this person is banned. So moderation is progressing, and I think that Telegram is interesting because yes, it is weird, and there are a lot of weird things inside happening, but it's also a community-based platform because of the bots and the API that enables community creativity, and developers make a lot of bots that kind of extend possibilities of Telegram beyond what Pavel Durov and his brother Nikolai Durov have originally thought. So Telegram is becoming kind of a decentralized platform in a way. And also I've seen numerous times how Telegram would block channels of pro-war, for example, people, or channels that would post private information of anti-war activists. Durov would come and like Durov's administration would just block these channels if these channels were reported. So some of the mechanisms work, but Durov is a libertarian, and he has stated it publicly. And libertarianism is, the motto of free speech. And free speech, unfortunately, includes alt-right speech as well. And that's why he is not going to ban people who have these alt-right islands within Telegram, unless these islands are reported by multiple users. And the report mechanisms work. If there is a crowdsourced action by many users that report a channel, the channel will be blocked. So in this sense, it is much more bottom up, I would say, than in Twitter, for example. People have to coordinate and ban a channel by reporting it many times. I don't know, this is interesting. I'm not judging, but I'm also very sad about how Telegram became a prison for everyone and people won't abandon it, even those who are technically very advanced. And that's what we try to show in our paper, that cryptographers who understand the failures and weaknesses of crypto protocol, MT-Proto, which Telegram is using, even they don't abandon it. So this is something weird, especially for Russian audience. They just are hooked like on a drug. Telegram has become this big thing that keeps Russian users addicted completely.
Thank you, Ksenia. We have 5 minutes. We start wrapping up. So, Sandra, do you have a final words, final question?
Well, yes. In response to what Ksenia just said about the crowd voting down, in one of the things we're facing in the U.S. Okay, I'm in Texas at a conservative university, but this is true all over the U.S. Is that there are now organizations that train students on how to get rid of faculty members who say things with which they're uncomfortable in the classroom. And we've had multiple experiences of students organizing themselves through GroupMe or some other means, mobbing professors and getting them in a lot of trouble, maybe even fired. So this is not, and it goes in the other direction, of course. This is people trying to get rid of those who are communicating progressive views, not alt-right views. So I'm not convinced that this is an advance in moderation.
Yeah, I think that Ksenia just had a daughter back who is asking for her urgently. Yeah, I agree, and I would like to say that. So we last week as a pre-conference to ICA, we did have this. We co-organized at San Society this pre-conference on alternative content moderation, and I would have to say, Sandra, that there is really a lot of a variety of things in which you can see things progressing on in some ways, and others moving forward, but in very discussable ways as well. So yeah, thanks for citing that experience of yours. Well, it's actually pretty awful. I hope that effective means to counter this are found soon.
Yes, thank you. Interesting. I didn't know about a pre-conference. Also very interesting, Francesca, to hear. So as Ksenia had an urgent issue to handle, which is totally understandable, I want to close off the session, thanking the speakers, of course, the authors for the really nice presentation and also very nice book. Also thanking the organizers, the IAMCR, but also Bruce and the others, Andrea, to help set this thing up and facilitating this thing to happen. So perhaps I'll give the last word to Andrea to really give the closing word, and then thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe, for the moderation discussion. Thank you again to Francesca and Ksenia, and congratulations on the book. It's amazing. I'm really happy that, I could also learn a bit more about your work. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I just posted in the chat a link for the next IAMCR webinar, which is a collective book launch by the journalism section. And yeah, thank you, everyone who was here. Congratulations again, Francesca and Ksenia.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for organizing and for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you around soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon somewhere.
Bye.
Bye.